Sit down and grab your lunch. It's time for the Bolts Brown Bag, the only show where you make the call.
Hey, there's no panic button around here, even though the Chargers are 1-2 and have lost 2 in a row on the road. Welcome to another edition of Bolts Brown Bag, only at 10news.com. This week brought to you by Scotch and Painkillers. Along with John Gennaro from the Mighty 1090 and boltsfromtheblue.com, I'm Ben Higgins. That was not pretty.
No
for
panic
Chargers
button?
fans, no panic button yet. Hey, 1-2, just where I said they would be on their way to a 9-7 season.
Okay.
Right at the beginning of the year.
You did.
I said win, lose, lose, 1-2 moving forward.
Yeah.
But it's just the way they lost that I think might start changing some opinions about the Chargers. Getting demolished 31-14 by the Minnesota Vikings, and if that offensive line doesn't get healthy, that's certainly the biggest concern from this game. I'm sure we'll be talking mostly about that this show.
There's a number of concerns that by themselves would make it difficult for the Chargers to beat any decent team in the NFL. The offensive line is in shambles. The defensive secondary is in shambles. There's absolutely no pass rush to speak of. The running game can't seem to accomplish anything, and Phillip Rivers is turning the ball over twice a game. All of those by themselves are worrisome, and that's 5 of them together. So at this point, they're not a team that's capable of beating any other team. And really, they're a Matt Stafford injury away from being 0-3.
And you didn't even bring up the coaching.
Not once.
We'll get right to our poll question, our popular poll question, which we bring back for the first time this season. And we have to throw Mike McCoy onto the hot seat. And I phrased it this way, and if you're watching online, you can just scroll down on the right and you'll see the poll question, and you can vote, and we'll update the results as the show goes along. But how hot should Mike McCoy's coaching seat be right now? And I say should because I think in reality the answer is it's still quite cool from the people who make the decisions. I don't think Tom Telesco or any of the Spanos family has any intention of getting rid of Mike McCoy anytime soon, even during the regular season. Now, if loss after loss after loss continues to pile up, maybe that reality will change. But I'm just talking about from a fan perspective right now, how hot you think it should be. And the choices are cool, lukewarm, toasty, or blazing.
And did you vote? I voted.
I did vote as well.
What did you vote?
I voted lukewarm.
I voted toasty.
Toasty, okay.
Toasty. Because really, I mean, going into this season, I thought the confidence of Mike McCoy can't be that high. He's been 9-7 every single year. Team doesn't appear to be getting any better. And so I thought he had to show that this team was better than his previous 2 seasons to get that extension. Because remember, after this year, he's only got 1 more year on that contract. They probably don't want him as a lame duck head coach. So I thought he had to make the team better. They're obviously not. Now he has to prove that this bad team can not only be as good as last year's, can be better than last year's, maybe even better than 2013. That's a tough task with this roster that's been assembled for him.
You know, to me, I agree with some of your points, and there were certainly some decisions, even yesterday, and pretty much every game that Mike McCoy coaches that I would change, like not going for it on 4th and 1 from the opposing 45 in, the first quarter.
Yeah.
A chance to get some points on the board. I hate it that he punted there. But the Vikings did the same thing later, and did that cost the Chargers the game? Almost certainly not, the way the game folded out. Could he have done anything about the injuries to the offensive line yesterday?
Probably not.
I don't really think he could have done anything. That game, to me, was lost. As soon as you go in with an injured DJ Fluker and an injured Chris Watt, and then all of a sudden, offensive linemen Orlando Franklin and Joe Barksdale and Chris Hairston and King Dunlap just start going down left and right. I don't think there's any coaching in the world that can salvage that situation. The Bolts, to me, were doomed to a loss when that happened. The coaching has to go on now this week and figuring out, how to get healthy bodies on the field, figuring out which ones, accurately figuring out which bodies are healthy and can contribute to you over the course of a full game, and coming up with a game plan that then does not necessarily rely on giving Phillip Rivers a whole ton of time to do something when obviously he's not going to have a ton of time until that offensive line is healthy again.
And 2 ways in which I actually can blame Mike McCoy for the offensive line. Number 1, the coaching staff didn't seem to make any adjustments to their game plan. Once guys started getting injured, it was obvious that the offensive line was terrible. Phillip Rivers was still making 5-step drops, 7-step drops, some 5-step drops that turned into 7 steps because he was so worried about the pass rush in his face. What they didn't do was a lot of quick, short passes, get the ball out of his hands, get the team confident. They just kept trying to run 10, 15, 20-yard routes. Occasionally you would hit on one, But the fact that they didn't change their game plan was knock number one against Mike McCoy. And number two, this is something to really consider. Mike McCoy is the guy who makes that decision on who's active and who's not. DJ Fluker played about a quarter when they said, no, he's too injured to be playing, and he started. Chris Watt, same thing. Jason Verrett, same thing. At one point, you got to face the fact, maybe these guys aren't healthy enough to be playing, even if you want them to be. Mike McCoy has to adjust how he goes about deciding if a guy's healthy enough to play on Sunday, because he's screwing that up right now.
You certainly get the cross-section of some angry fans on Twitter, like Football Fun Day Nick, who says the hot seat should be boiling right now for Mike McCoy. Got a couple of those. But there's been a lot of backlash here as well toward Tom Telesco, like Big Jen, who tweets, Mike is a great coach, as was Norville. We gave him time, but the Telesco kid keeping Brown on the roster. And I've gotten 2 or 3 other tweets questioning Tom Telesco's roster construction and whether he's more to blame for the Chargers' 1-2 start than the coaching staff.
You know, in a week where the Chargers lost to offensive coordinator Norv Turner, this looks a lot like a Norv Turner team. It looks a lot like the issues we were having a couple years ago, and we're asking ourselves the same questions we were asking then. Is this the fault of the head coach? Is this the fault of the offensive coordinator and their game plan is what's killing Phillip Rivers? Or do they simply not have enough talent and the guilt falls on the GM? Or is it both? By the time the Chargers got around to firing Norv Turner, A.J. Smith went with him. I don't think that would be the case here, but I don't think Telesco deserves to avoid the blame. This roster is not a good one, and the coaches that he has hired are actually screwing it up a little bit more.
All right, the early results so far, 48% voting toasty, like you.
Yeah.
28% voting blazing, and 24% have it at lukewarm.
Blazing hot.
Blazing hot, that seat.
And no one said cool?
McCoy.
0% for cool?
I think we're still at 0% for cool. I don't know if an NFL head coach's seat is ever that cool.
Well, you know, first-year head coaches are usually pretty cool. Bill Belichick, I'm assuming his seat is constantly very cool.
It usually is, but remember last year when they just got trounced by the Kansas City Chiefs and Tom Brady was done, and even Belichick was facing some questions about, is this it? The dynasty is over, the future of the team in question, and they go out and
win like
another
13
Super Bowl.
games
yeah,
in
exactly.
Super Bowl.
So
Yeah, it's, you know.
That's why it's silly, again, to overreact after 3 games. There are certainly some legitimate concerns with the San Diego Chargers team. And again, the offensive line is the big one. Now, to Phillip Rivers' credit, like he always does, he did not throw anyone under the bus after the game, but he did talk about some of the difficulties in having to shuffle different guys in and out of that offensive line. Let's take a listen.
We're 1-2. We're 1-2. We got 13 weeks. You've covered us long enough to know if we quit or not, or if we're going to go scatter. So there you go. I think you knew the answer before you asked.
That's actually the other one, which was interesting as well. It was the first time, really in over 10 years, I've ever heard Phillip Rivers get testy at a reporter's question.
Right, and I believe I tweeted this out this morning. I put it on Facebook, and I said the same thing. I said, have you ever seen Phillip Rivers get snippy? I haven't. And actually, right before then, someone was asking him about, in this situation, why didn't you change up the play call? And matter of factly, despite the fact that he's making a lot of calls on the line, checking out of about 70% of the plays, being that Peyton Manning guy on the line, he emphatically said, I do not call the plays.
I'm not sure who asked that question, but my ears tell me, if I made a guess, I think it was Jim Alexander from the Riverside paper.
I was really curious because I couldn't place it.
I pumped up the volume and tried to match the voice with people who cover the team. Obviously, I didn't travel to Minnesota yesterday.
Right.
I'm here, and it sounded like the voice I recognized, who's one of the newspaper reporters from Riverside who covers the team regularly.
Right.
Because it was obviously someone who's covered the team for a while based on Philip's answer.
Right.
I'll probably get confirmation on that later today or at practice this week, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was. It is interesting, though. I mean, a lot of athletes, coaches will bristle, more than that on a daily basis at reporters' questions. It's just unusual for Phillip Rivers to do so.
And what was curious to me is that, like you said, Phillip has been in worse situations than this. Maybe he's just hit a point in his career where he's tired of it. Maybe he was so frustrated with himself that he just didn't want to deal with it. But he's had worse games than this. Not even in the too distant past he's had worse games than this. He's had worse offensive lines in front of him than this. To me, I don't want to read way too much into it, but that sounded like he was not happy with not just himself, but the position that he was put in.
All right, let's go back now and get the other sound of Phillip Rivers talking about the shuffling on the offensive line in front of him.
They fought their tail off. There's guys out there fighting that were pushing it to play anyway. So thank goodness they were dressed, because if not, I don't know what we'd have done. So, our loss is not on the O-line. It's not on them at all. It's on the quarterback, and I can name a lot of things that it's on. So, but yes, it makes it more difficult. But the guys that fought, the 5 we had left that fought like crazy till the end, certainly is appreciated.
As always with Phillip Rivers, praising the guys, their effort in front of him. But
right.
I thought one of the most telling parts of that comment was acknowledging that you had a couple of guys who maybe shouldn't have even been suiting up to begin with.
Right.
And the plan, I believe, for DJ Fluker was to rotate him in and out over the course of the game, and that's how they started. He played the first series, came out the next series.
Chris Hairston came in.
Yeah, was going to go back in the next series, but then with all the injuries, they were left having to put DJ Fluker in the entire game, which wasn't great for his ankle.
Yeah.
He was barely able to walk from reports after the game. You had Orlando Franklin go down. Chris Watt was already injured coming into the game. King Dunlap suffered another concussion, which has become a recurring problem. That's a big concern. Joe Barksdale got hurt at one point. Chris Hairston got hurt at one point. Johnny Troutman, of course, is already hurt and has not played yet this season. I think the only 2 offensive linemen who actually ended the game reasonably healthy were Trevor Robinson, the backup center, and Kenny Wiggins, who I had even forgotten was on the team going into the game.
Yeah, and I think I checked sometime in the second quarter to make sure that there weren't any healthy offensive linemen that they had left inactive for the game, and there weren't. Thankfully, the only inactive offensive lineman was Johnny Troutman, but they still needed every single guy. And even then, Marty Caswell from the Mighty 1090 reported, she was the one who reported after the game, that it was amazing that DJ Fluker was able to finish that game because he could barely walk after it. And she's got a video up on the Mighty1090.com that she also tweeted out where you see Fluker sitting in the locker room after the game, and you can sense that he just has nothing left to give. Just nothing. He's got no energy. I'd be amazed if he was able to stand up on his own after that interview. At some point, I know they didn't really have any other options, but at some point you got to look at it and say, should that guy really be out there?
Well, I mean, and at some point you had to look and say, should Phillip Rivers really be out there?
Well, and at some point they pulled him.
And they finally pulled him in the fourth quarter. Maybe one series too late, but I'll give Mike McCoy credit for actually doing it. But can you imagine how sore Rivers must be this morning? He took 4 sacks, and some of the biggest hits, like that one by Anthony Barr, came even on a completion. I mean, Phillips said that he got the wind knocked out of him, worse than he's ever had before. But for someone who had a rib injury last year, chest injury, taking a big shot like that to the chest, to me, that's like hold your breath for the Chargers season, because it may have just ended on that play.
And I don't know if you remember this. And, because when Kellen Clemens was going to come in, then they called the timeout and he didn't come in. I think everyone was like, oh, God, there goes the season. If you remember before the season, I was a little bit worried about the fact that Phillip Rivers had a back injury last year that he never had surgery on. It never got fixed. They just sort of left it and said, well, it's going to get better. And that's fine, but a lot of times it takes one big hit to set you right back to where you were. Those were some hits yesterday that if Rivers woke up today and his back hurt as bad as it did during the last month and a half of last season, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't blame him, and I wouldn't be surprised.
And Phillip Rivers wasn't a mistake-free yesterday. Even he acknowledged, I saw a lot of people saying, it's Stevie Johnson, that interception went off his hands, that was returned for a touchdown. Rivers should have never thrown that pass, and he acknowledged it because he said, even if it's completed, we're not getting the first down. We're still kicking the field goal to get within 2 scores and make it a 14-point game. I should never throw that pass in that situation because there's no gain. It's all risk, no reward. So that was clearly a mistake by Phillip Rivers, and one that ended up sealing the game. I mean, you think about it, if the Chargers either just score a field goal there and don't give up the touchdown, their 17-point loss all of a sudden turns into a 7-point loss, which doesn't seem quite as panic-inducing today as we all feel a 31-14 drubbing is.
Exactly. The issue with the Chargers right now is that they continue to fall behind early and often, and as much as we want to, say, hey, Phillip Rivers has got that fourth-quarter comeback in him, he's not a good comeback quarterback. he's exactly what Brett Favre was, which is there's a chance he's going to bring you back and it's going to be spectacular, but what you really want is for him to not think that he has to win the game, because that's when the mistakes start being made. And this is exactly the team, this is exactly what happened that got Norv fired. Rivers had one of the worst seasons he's ever had, tons of interceptions, tons of fumbles, and it was because he was holding onto the ball too long behind a bad offensive line and trying to win the games by himself. It feels like we haven't progressed past that. Even though 2013 was great, everything since then feels like the last couple years of North.
And what was 2013? It was Mike McCoy, but it was also Ken Wisenhunt as the offensive coordinator. Now he's gone, and they haven't exactly been able to duplicate that quick release offense that worked so well in 2013.
Right. One of the best things I saw from Ken Wisenhunt when he was the offensive coordinator of the Chargers was every time Rivers would have a bad series, the next series he would come out and there would be a couple of 1, 2, 3 yard passes to put him in a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 situation where now he's got confidence. He's like, yeah, I hit that guy. Yeah, I hit that guy. We were, one tackle away from a big play. He's feeling good about himself. I never see that from Frank Reich or Mike McCoy or whoever's calling the play. It's just, let's try and get the first down. Every play, let's try and get the first down. They run it on first down almost every single series, and it's frustrating. And then they do the draw play on second down, and then on third down, they got to go 9, 10 yards to get the first down. There's just no consistent philosophy to the offense.
Rich makes a good point here on Twitter. Writes, Phillip needs to relax while changing the plays at the line. He appears to be panicked, and it must be affecting the young guys. That's just Phillip Rivers' personality. I don't know that it really is panic, but it does come off when you're watching that way as a little panicked, and perhaps it is. And I know someone, I think it was someone from Bolts from the Blue, Kyle tweeted out on the audibles when he's yelling out 80-80, and then
he throws the 80.
Floyd.
Yeah.
Is it a little too obvious that that's the play? Because that's twice this season that he's yelled out 80-80 and then thrown the ball to Malcolm Floyd.
Right. That was actually Jerome that said that. And it reminded me of week 1 when Rivers was yelling out, what was it? It was Lucy and Rose. And if he yelled out Lucy, it was a run play that was going left. If they yelled out Rose, it was a run play going to the right. And I remember people on Twitter going, if I can figure this out, why do they think an NFL team can?
Even dumb defenders are going to get that one pretty quickly, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is, because Phillip Rivers is a bright guy. He doesn't need to simplify it that much. Maybe he's just making it up on the fly, saying, hey, I see an opportunity to Floyd. I'm going to throw to him like Malcolm, do whatever it is you do to get open quickly. Maybe that's the play call, but it's sad because more often than not, you're just telling the defense what's coming.
All right, let's get an update on our NFL picks contest because, John, you had a very good week going 3 for 3. You got all 6 possible points with the Patriots destroying the Jaguars. The Panthers, you got that one early before Drew Brees went out and racked up the line, so that was a win. And the Eagles, your upset pick. I got 2 out of 3, 4 out of the 6 points. Bengals were my 3-point upset selection. They won outright, and then the Cardinals destroyed the 49ers, but obviously the Jags didn't even cover with that huge spread. And Chris Ello just got his 1-point pick. Came very close. The Colts won, but it was a 3-point spread, and they only won by 2 at the end of the game. So a tough one for Chris. But everyone's still close, 15, 13, 10 right now at this point in the season. It is time for our Bolts Brown Bagger of the game. I don't know if we're going to agree this week. We didn't quite agree last week.
No.
I thought this week we'd give it to John Phillips.
Okay.
Who stepped up in the absence of Ladarius Green, made the best catch I've ever seen John Phillips make, and one of the best catches, I think, this season by any San Diego Charger.
Right.
And then Phillip Rivers, I thought smartly hustled to the line to run another play to prevent a challenge, something you see Peyton Manning do a lot. But then after watching it again, I decided it was probably a catch anyway, and if you had waited, maybe you could have goaded Minnesota into losing a timeout on a challenge and taking some more time on that next play.
Well, and I'm sure he didn't know that it was a catch. He, better safe than sorry. Let's get those yards in there. I would tend to agree with you. I thought John Phillips had a pretty good game, but I do want to highlight Keenan Allen. As bad as the offense was, as bad as the defense was, as bad as everything was, Keenan Allen, 12 catches, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, some of that with Kellen Clemens. Even when the game was way out of hand, Keenan Allen was still fighting for every yard, getting the occasional big play, and getting into the end zone. From what we saw last week, where he very obviously lost focus in the beginning of the game and sort of took himself out of it, I thought this was a very good bounce-back game for him.
Was the defense that bad? That's my question.
Actually, no, you're right. It wasn't.
There were some good stops. They often did stop Adrian Peterson, but What Norv Turner did, and this was got to be frustrating to some Chargers fans, he did what he never did for LaDainian Tomlinson in his first couple of years, and that is kept feeding him until he'd finally break the big one. We saw so many times that Norv would give up on LT in the second half.
Right.
And he did not do that with Adrian Peterson, and then it paid off big time when he started finally breaking the big runs, which is how it's supposed to work when you have, a Hall of Fame type back like that.
Right. And I think part of the problem, in addition to the fact that Adrian Peterson just kept coming at the defense, was the Chargers offense did them no favors. There was a lot of 3-and-outs. There was a lot of really short drives. It was like, hey, great job stopping Adrian Peterson. We know that was hard. 30 seconds later, get out there and do it again. And so after a while, you're going to break down. You're not going to beat Adrian Peterson every single time, and certainly not when you're gassed. So the offense was bad enough that it affected the defense. But outside of that, I thought John Pagano called a great game. Considering they only had 2 healthy cornerbacks for much of that game, it's incredible. Teddy Bridgewater didn't throw a touchdown and completed about 50% of his passes.
That's 2 things that I wanted to point out, though. Obviously, 1 sack is something a lot of people are making a point of through 3 weeks.
It's an important stat.
It's an issue. The fact that Melvin Ingram doesn't have one yet, it floors me.
Yeah.
If you would have told me he's playing all 3 games and he still doesn't have the quarterback once, wow. Would have never seen that coming.
And really, the run defense is what's killing him, because where he gets his sacks, where he makes his money, is 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. And the run defense is so bad that every 3rd down is 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, where he's got to protect against the run almost more than he has to go after the quarterback.
Right. And then the last thing about injuries, you kind of mentioned it. The offensive line, the Chargers have been hit hard like they have the last few seasons, but it's amazing how concentrated they are. It's really all in the offensive line and in the secondary.
Yeah.
The two, everywhere else is relatively healthy on this roster. Tight ends as well, if you include the gate suspension, but it's the concentration that's almost more difficult to overcome than the number of injuries. If you get one player injured at every position, well, most teams can actually handle that. They've got enough backups that they can work a plan. But when you have 5 injuries at one position, there's really no team that has that kind of depth in the league.
Well, and isn't this just what happens to the Chargers every year? Last year, I believe it was the outside linebackers. The year before, it was the secondary. They've had a couple years where it's been the offensive line or the defensive line.
They had wide receivers a few years ago.
They had wide receivers a few years ago when we had Patrick Creighton being signed off the street to pair with Shea Ajiratutu, and they won games with that. Because there's certain areas where you can make it work. But right now, we're playing with John Phillips and nobody at tight end. We're playing with no one who's healthy on the offensive line. And right now there's 2 out of 5, so 40% of your cornerbacks are healthy. It is very, very concentrated, but apparently that's just how it goes with the San Diego Chargers.
All right, let's get to our weekly 3-question segment with our web producer, Faris. First, I got to get Faris's comment on John's outfit today. Very supportive of the Chargers.
Yeah. Go Padres.
I like it.
Yeah.
Because they've had a just rock'em sock'em season that they're wrapping up. Right?
Look, I'm less embarrassed to be a Padre fan today than I am to be a Chargers fan, so I had to rock it.
All right, I think some good questions today. I'm looking forward to these.
Okay, yeah. So first question, which of these coaches is getting fired during their bye week? During their team's bye week? Joe Philbin, Jeff Fisher, Chuck Pagano, Jay Gruden, Lovie Smith, or Sean Payton?
I think it's an easy one, actually, because I looked at the bye weeks, and the Miami Dolphins are 1-2, and probably in worse shape than the Chargers. Very similar. First week, they fell behind a bad team, Washington, came back and pulled it out. The next week, they lost a close one, but to a worse team than the Chargers, the Jaguars. And then they got actually blown out of the water yesterday by, who did they lose to yesterday? The Bills. They just got absolutely blown out of the water by the Bills. So they're 1-2.
24-0 at one point.
But now, instead of coming home for a cupcake like the Browns, they have to go to London this week
to play the Jets.
Yeah. If they lose that game and they're in their bye week follows, I don't know that Joe Philbin comes back from London.
They just leave him there?
If they're 1-3 going into a post-London bye week, that's a great time to make a coaching change. And quite frankly, I was surprised he made it through the end of last season after their continual December collapses. 2 years ago, the Chargers needed them to collapse to make the playoffs. They did. I think Joe Philbin's on a very short lease now.
What about Chuck Pagano?
See, Chuck Pagano is my guy from your list, and I'm going to give you another one in a second.
Yeah.
But I don't even know that he's necessarily going to get fired. He might quit. He might resign during a bye week. He came out publicly this week and said he doesn't expect to be back with the Colts next year. They offered him a contract extension. He turned it down. He is publicly feuding with the general manager, who's his boss. He's not interested in being with the Colts anymore. So either they're going to fire him just to move on and get the bad tension out of there, or he's going to resign at some point, and I think it's going to come before the end of the season. So that's my guy from your list. However, this is a wild card. I would not be surprised if Jim Tomsula got fired during this season, his first season, because the Niners are that bad. They look completely confused, overmatched, and this is a guy, when that hire was made, everyone scratched their head and went, who? His resume is not good enough for that as a head coach. He was never a coordinator of any sort. The players don't respect him. They may like him, but they don't respect him. That's a team that's going to go deeper and deeper down the toilet drain until Tomsula's out of there. They might just move on real quick.
So did they hire him? Do you think that was like a purposeful move, an intentional move? Like, we're going to hire him knowing that we can just get rid of him sometime in the middle of the season?
I'm sure they wanted him to be
successful.
successful.
They wanted him to be successful. I think they thought, we like this guy a lot.
Knew the team, but they had to know that team was going to be horrible.
But before, John, you pile on the 49ers anymore, they're also 1-2 like the Chargers, and they beat the Vikings.
They did. They did. And they made the Vikings look terrible.
Yes, they did.
So, I mean, I guess there's always potential that they could turn that around. But I feel like that 49ers train wreck that started when Jim Harbaugh left and a bunch of players retired and people got arrested, it just seems like it's getting worse and worse and worse. I don't think Tomsula is the guy to pull them out of it. So, I mean, maybe these two things are related. Maybe Pagano resigns over here, 49ers fire Tomsula, and they're like, Pagano's the guy who pulls us out of it.
Enough 49ers talk. They're irrelevant
I just don't think Tomsula makes it to the end of the year.
I want to move on to question number 2.
Okay. Are the Cardinals representing the NFC in the Super Bowl?
I think so.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Good question.
Yeah. I would have not foreseen a scenario that after 3 weeks, because I hate making big judgments after 3 weeks. In fact, I'm sitting here saying, try not to judge the Chargers too harshly after 3 weeks. How can you possibly say the Cardinals are the best team in the NFC West when you've got the two-time defending NFC champion Seahawks, who just shut out the Bears in their first home game yesterday? But from what I've seen, the Cardinals are the best team in the NFC West, and really the best team in that entire conference. It's their conference to lose now in my mind.
And this is where, and again, the Chargers probably had their chance at Bruce Arians, and they probably missed it. Whatever. Hindsight's 20/20. Bruce Arians' team is the opposite of Mike McCoy's team. Not only are they well prepared, they seem like they love playing football. They're incredibly confident. They never make mistakes. They never hurt themselves. They don't make stupid penalties. They don't turn the ball over. And I was worried about their defense this year because they lost John Abraham, and their defensive coordinator, whose name escapes me, is now the Jets head coach. Anyone know his name?
No.
Oh, I'm blanking.
Bowles. Todd Bowles.
Todd Bowles, thank you. And I know how good he is, so I assumed their defense was going to get worse. Their defense is better.
Let me ask you this,
Carson Palmer is actually probably a really good NFL quarterback who's never actually had a team this good around him.
How many columns do you think are going to be written
about Bruce Arians and the Chargers?
About Chris Johnson, the redemption story. You have Chris Johnson and you have Carson Palmer. If this team goes deep in the playoffs, you've got two guys that were – one guy was out of the NFL. The other guy tore his ACL twice. Like –
the problem here is it's Carson Palmer, and we know that sometime, like in Week 10, an active ACL is going to fall from the sky and land on his head.
Yeah,
because that's what's happened to him every single year of his career when good things have happened to Carson Palmer.
If he wins a Super Bowl, say he goes to the Super Bowl, wins a Super Bowl, is he in the Hall of Fame?
No.
No, but he's definitely in a different level.
But if he wins the next two, then he walks in like
then
Elway.
He's like, yeah, Kurt Warner at least.
Right. But I to bring this back to the Chargers for a second, I always look at, who's the most comparable quarterback to Phillip Rivers in the NFL? Which guy am I looking at? It's like that guy's just like Phillip Rivers. Maybe not in the style of play, but in how good he is. And I always thought it was Tony Romo. I always thought Romo and Rivers were right there on the cusp. They were probably better than people gave them credit for. A lot of people were annoyed with them for whatever reason. Now I think it's Carson Palmer. And granted, Palmer...
That's not the insult that most Chargers fans
think
you're making
either.
Well,
would Palmer, say you take Palmer, you put him on the Chargers. Say he comes in...
Same team.
A healthy
Palmer. He plays for the Chargers for the last 10 years.
Well, I mean,
the Chargers
with
a better team
with his injuries, no, of course. I mean, Phillip Rivers, the durability...
Take away the injuries, is he a better quarterback?
Take away the injuries, it's close to me. They're very close.
Take away the injuries, they're very close.
But one of Phillip Rivers' most important qualities is the fact that
Never
he's
gets
always
injured.
on the field.
Yeah.
And if he does get injured, he still plays
But
anyway.
how much is Rivers' success due to the fact that he's been with the same team? He's had that luxury of being with the same team, whereas Palmer's had to bounce around. He's had injuries.
I mean, I
he's
think
had the same system.
Some, but he's had 4 different coordinators, I think.
The only place I can look at and say that really hurt Carson Palmer was Oakland. And that was after Hugh Jackson left and he was stuck with whoever the other guy was.
Yeah.
So that maybe took a year or two away from him, which is why his numbers probably are not as good as Rivers. But they're both guys that are incredibly talented passers, but you got to build the team around them to support them, and Palmer has that team right now, and Rivers doesn't.
All right, question number 3.
Okay. If your life depended on a win, so you're in a situation where you need a win to live, who would you want quarterbacking your team? You have to choose between these 3 guys.
Oh.
Kirk Cousins, Blake Bortles, or Josh McCown.
Why are you trying to kill me?
Yeah.
What do you have against us? Why are you trying to kill us both?
Right.
You're giving us like the certain death option, no matter what we pick.
Can I take any of the backup quarterbacks from those teams? Because I think I'd rather go with
I'll
RG3.
throw Ryan Mallett in there. We'll add Ryan Mallett.
I really want RG3, but he's not here. Or even Johnny Manziel.
I guess Bortles.
I'll go McCown. Yeah, I would never. Bortles would be my last selection.
Really?
Yeah. I'd go with McCown.
McCown?
Cousins has won a game. I don't know. We're dead.
We're dead. We
dead.
died.
We're both dead.
We died the second you finished that question.
Go away, Faris. We're both dead. You
right.
killed us
See you guys
both.
later.
Those are our 3 questions with Faris. Got to look ahead now, and not just to next week's game against the Cleveland Browns, which obviously takes on quite a bit more urgency with the Chargers. I mean, you fall to 1-3. It's not game over, but you are now in a hole. You're not in a hole at 1-2. You're in a hole at 1-3.
And if you're 1-3 and you lost to the Cleveland Browns, who look, their defense looks fantastic, but they're still the Cleveland Browns. Josh McCown is still their starting quarterback, unless it's Johnny Manziel. Either way, they're not a good team right now.
But you can argue that this is maybe the most winnable game on the Chargers' schedule. It's at home. It's against a team that is not very good without a great quarterback.
They can't put up a lot of points.
You have to win games like this if you hope to do anything. But really looking ahead, we've got the next 6 games before the Chargers finally get to the bye week. Probably wishing it came a little bit earlier. But if you look at this stretch, this is the make hay point of the season.
Yeah.
Other than that Week 6 game at the Green Bay Packers, which obviously is one of the toughest ones on the Chargers' schedule, the other 5 are now eminently winnable games for the Chargers if they're even moderately healthy. Browns this week. Pittsburgh Steelers now with no Ben Roethlisberger after his MCL strain yesterday, going to be out 4 to 6 weeks.
Monday night game,
So they come in on Monday night without Ben Roethlisberger. Ben was the guy who really scared me. I mean, Antonio Brown's great, but without Ben to throw it to him, he doesn't scare me as much.
Right,
either.
Michael Vick does not scare anybody.
Huge drop-off. And then after the Packers, you get the Raiders, who have played well. I mean, that's not a guaranteed win for sure, but you're getting them at home. Then at the Baltimore Ravens, which you think, well, that's a really tough game to start the season. The Ravens have looked awful at 0-3 to start the year.
Yeah.
And then the Bears at home, who are really one of the worst teams in football, and you've got them on a Monday night game as well. So,
You know what I'm seeing when I'm looking at these teams? The Browns' best offensive player this year, Travis Benjamin. Steelers, Antonio Brown. Packers is Aaron Rodgers. That's not even a question. Raiders, Amari Cooper. Ravens, Steve Smith Sr. Bears still have Alshon Jeffrey. Those issues.
Although he's been hurt. But,
I know,
yeah.
but they'll have him
They should
probably
have him
by
by
the time
then,
the Chargers get here. That cornerback situation with Brandon Flowers and Jason Verrett, they're going to have to get healthy because as important as the offensive line is in these games, they're going to need Flowers or Verrett to play a part in these games and shut down those number 1 wide receivers.
I say 4-2 minimum. 5-1 would be ideal for the Chargers.
What I like is that there's only one of these games that's a 10 a.m. game. That's the one in Baltimore. We have 2 Monday night games and 3 games that are at 1 p.m.
4 of 6 at home.
4 of 6 at home.
This is the stretch here. Next 6 games.
If they don't go 4-6, which would make them
4-2 would make them 5-4 at that point.
Yeah, 5-4. If they're not 5-4 after week 9, they're pretty much toast.
Yeah, they'd have to go on an amazing run with 4 games left against the Chiefs and the Broncos still.
Chiefs and Broncos, that's 4 of your remaining games.
I mean, you couldn't count them out because they control their divisional destiny still with all those games left, but they'd have to win basically all of them.
Right.
And if they don't go at least 4-2 here.
And if they can't win these games, chances are they're not winning those ones either.
Right.
So I agree. What you would love is 5-1, over the next 6 weeks. What you're realistically going for is 4-2, 3-3 or less, and 3-3 or less, and Mike McCoy's got to start looking at what the other job openings are.
All right, speaking of Mike McCoy, final poll results. Toasty is our leader right now at 53%. Lukewarm and Blazing both at 24%. No one thinks Mike McCoy is sitting on an ice pack at this point.
I think that means I'm right.
His seat is not cool. All right, you win this one. You are off next week.
I'm not here next week.
Chris Ella will be sitting in your chair, so he can hopefully rally in our Pick'em game.
Yeah, good luck with that.
We'll
I don't
see.
think he's catching me.
But we'll tweet out our Pick'em picks on usually Wednesday or Thursday morning, and we will be back next Monday at 12:30 with another edition of Bolts Brown Bag only at 10news.com. Thanks for joining us.